Welcome to Optily Radio, your regular 30-minute dose of everything you need to accelerate your e-commerce marketing success.
Welcome to another episode of Optily Radio. I'm your host, Nina White. Today, we're talking to a partnerships expert in the world of e-commerce development, focusing on Magento. We've talked a good bit about Shopify on this show, but Magento is a completely different beast. This powerhouse engine supports some of the biggest brands' online stores. I'm talking Asus, Land Rover, and Burger King big here. Needless to say, I'm really interested in learning more about Magento and what it has to offer for scaling e-commerce companies, along with some expert insights from today's guest. So, let's dive right in. Joining us today in the Optily virtual studio is Robert Rand. Robert is currently the Director of Partnerships and Alliances at JetRails, a fully managed e-commerce hosting partner. Before that, as CTO, he helped lead Brand Internet Marketing, a full-service digital agency, until it was acquired in 2017. He's got over a decade of experience in helping businesses of all types and sizes to grow and succeed. And from the Optily team, we have Chris Machine, our Director of Strategic Partnerships, with us today. Chris has nearly a decade of experience in partnerships, having worked with all the major platforms in e-commerce. Bringing the competitive spirit of baseball to his work, Chris has helped companies bring in millions of dollars in revenue through the partnership relationships he's created. So, welcome to the show, Robert and Chris.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So, before we dive into marketing and stuff, Robert, I was poking around your LinkedIn and I noticed that you were an extra in SpiderMan 2, which is my absolute favorite Star Wars or Spider-Man movie. So I have to ask how that was, and did you get to meet Dr. Octopus?
I got to meet a lot of the actors and actresses, the director Sam Raimi. It was a fun time. I was in college in New York at the time, and a family friend was trying to break into acting, and so she was an extra, a background actor on the set. And so the first day I snuck on, and they wound up inviting me back, and I actually got paid by Sony for a few days of work around Columbia University and down around Wall Street. And so I learned quickly that it wasn't what I wanted to do for a profession, but it was really interesting to experience that. And I can find myself in the blooper reel because, you know, they don't really zoom in on the extras, that you're kind of blurred in the background most of the time, that you're not in focus. But there's that one little tidbit that I was able to capture.
Awesome. That sounds super exciting. Cool. So why don't you tell us a bit about, yourself, how you did get into the world of e-commerce and partnerships and all of that?
Well, it depends on how far back you want to go. But, I was always one of those nerds that was completely overtaken by computers and technology. And professionally, it really started when I got into the agency space. I came from a small business background. My family's been manufacturing and wholesaling purses, ladies' handbags, since 1969. And so I understood a lot of moving businesses like that into e-com. But it wasn't until my brother took some of his background in the space with SEO and web design and formed an agency, and that I joined on. That we really started to break into that space. And after years and years of working with, all the major platforms of the day, partnering with most of them, and working to oversee everything from the initial brand conception, all the logo design and graphics and colors and fonts and everything that would go into formulating the imagery, through all of the features and functionality, all of the digital marketing that was going to happen. That we were an Inc. 5000 company, a Google Premier partner. We brought brands like Swiss Gear and Invicta watches into e-commerce. And so every project that you take on, including the ones from brands that no one listening to this has ever heard of, often B2B or otherwise niche players, you learn something new. And so I would get certifications along the way. I'd be both attending and speaking at trade shows along the way. And every project, you sort of walked away with something. It's like, hey, can you run those ads? Can you do some advertising for us on Snapchat? Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, we understand how to track. We understand, your messaging. We understand the graphics and everything. So we'll figure this out. And so that was, lots of great years of building up that repertoire in this space.
Awesome. That's very exciting. So how exactly did you come to be at JetRails? What exactly do you do there now? And what does JetRails do in general?
Sure. So after the agency was acquired, I thought long and hard about what I enjoyed most out of my day. And, truth be told, while I oversaw certain facets of sales engineering and digital marketing, conversion optimization, different, as most agencies have experienced, when you're in leadership, you wear a lot of hats. I really enjoyed the partnerships and alliances side of things. And so I decided that was really the avenue that I wanted to continue to pursue. I found that it was really one of the things that took our agency from being more of a local player to being more of a national or international agency, and really built up that stature and that demand. And that success, really, that without what our partners brought to the table, we couldn't deliver the results that we did. And so that passion for that side of my agency years really, led me into the tech space a little bit more directly. I spent about a year as the VP of Alliances at a company called N-Channel that does multi-channel integration, connecting point of sale with e-commerce, ERP, and accounting suites, basically, gluing together these different systems so that a business that sold through different channels, through online and offline, could really operate efficiently, have their inventory managed, their order fulfillment managed, that sort of thing. And almost 3 years ago, my friends at JetRails pulled me in, and it's been a wild ride since. It's a fantastic team. Mission critical web hosting. So as opposed to the traditional model of getting web hosting, where you go to a website, you pick a plan, you hope you picked well, you're probably going to be on some kind of a server environment with a bunch of other sites, noisy neighbors, as I like to think of it. And if you have issues or challenges, you reach out to support, you kind of get kicked around tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No one knows you, you don't know them. There's really, it's what I would call maybe best effort that, we'll try to solve your problem. JetRails flipped the script and said, instead of going that route, we will size out the right environment. Everyone gets a dedicated single tenant environment that's optimized just for them. We'll migrate everything over and make sure that everything is perfect through a user acceptance testing process. And it's proactive, where you have a dedicated account manager. We pick up the phone 24/7 within 10 seconds. About 90% of the time, that first person to pick up the phone is going to resolve whatever request or issue. We monitor the environments 24/7. So if there's a DDoS attack or a resource issue or something going awry, typically we can identify that first before shoppers are reaching out, having problems, orders are being lost in droves, and we can nip it in the bud. We can really address it before it festers into something more significant. So it's a very different way of looking at web hosting, where it truly is fully managed with your content delivery network, your web application firewalling, intrusion detection systems, malware scanners. It goes above and beyond just the DNS records and SSL and off-server backups and some of the basics. It's all those layers that are really going to make an e-commerce website stay fast, secure, stable, scalable, to address those issues with proper support, as if these were your in-house 24/7 team watching out for you, trying to, build that kind of a partnership with every client. So that's what JetRails does, and I oversee all of our partnerships and relationships with outside organizations, whether that's on the infrastructure side, companies like AWS and Cloudflare, whether that's our agency partners that are building and developing the websites that are crucial to the success of every project, that they are helping to build and such, whether that's others in the tech space, that especially in e-commerce, we know it takes a village. So it's not just about the web host and the devs, but it's about these other third-party solutions that are also integrating and have to work just as well and could be slowing down a site or causing errors or other friction points. And so we very much see ourselves as part of that village.
So that sounds really amazing. That's like such a holistic approach to, managing an e-commerce, infrastructure. So like, I'm curious how big the team is, especially the support team that you can, commit to answering the phone 24/7.
So that's the funny part, is that it's a lean team. And most people assume that in order to do that, you need a lot of staff. What we've learned, and the company is around in web hosting since the year 2000. A couple of college buddies started a hosting company, very typical tech story. So there's a long, long history of understanding the market. You can have a lot of people that are answering the phones, reading scripts, that are very basic in the support space. Or you can have those advanced people jumping right in. And when you cut out a lot of that, of that paper pushing of the issue and really just focus on those core users, you don't need quite as many staff members. At the same time, we really deal with more established merchants because we're dealing with dedicated environments and fully managed solutions that are going to be able to get a 5-star result for a client. We're into the hundreds of dollars a month for web hosting, as opposed to, everyone sees Super Bowl ads and other things from companies that offer things in the single dollars a month. There's economy of scale there. And so we're able to provide something that matches what the e-commerce market needs, as opposed to a hobbyist or, a small site that gets a few clicks a month or something that's not quite as mission critical. And so with that, we're 20 some odd people, and we're able to, deal with multi-billion-dollar companies very successfully. I've been with the company 3 years, and we've never lost someone because we couldn't service their needs because we didn't have enough staffing. Just the opposite, typically they're wondering how we're able to achieve it. And I think it really just comes back to principles that are focused more on the outcomes than specifically on what you traditionally find in web hosting, which is the race to the bottom of how are we going to get this a few pennies less, which, cost optimization is extremely important. And it's not that we get away from that, but they're trying to figure out how many people can we put on this equipment, share as much as possible, really, drive up profits and drive down costs as above and beyond just making it cheap for the user. And, for us, it's more about how do we make sure that this customer is going to stay with us for a decade. We have extremely high longevity with these customers. Our attrition rate is really very, very low, which is rare in web hosting. And one of the reasons why when I audited some of this before I came on with the team, and I was blown away that they were able to comfortably service customers for as long as they do. So it's a lean team, but quite effective.
That's awesome. Yeah, really great. So can you explain a little bit about Magento itself as a platform? So we've talked quite a bit about, Shopify on this show. So what are some of the ways that it stands out against the more, plug and play options?
Sure. So Magento has been around longer than a Shopify, and has a lot of benefits that come along with its history. And so at the core, the biggest difference is that Magento is open source. You download a copy, you install it in the hosting environment of your choosing, you're in control. It's your website. You can access that source code, write extensions for it so that you can really do whatever you want with the site itself. With Shopify and similar software as a service or SaaS platforms, it's closer to having an Amazon account. You create an account, you have to adhere to their terms of service. They have access to all the data. You have some level of control of what the user's seeing. In the case of Shopify, of course, you can add your design theme, your branding. You have much more control than, let's say, an Amazon account. But you're going through their APIs, which they have limits on. in the case of Shopify specifically, you're paying their merchant services fees or a penalty if you want to use your own. There are accounts that are certainly shut down for a variety of reasons. And so you're dealing with, something where you really have to work within the confines of a third party versus having your own. And so Magento gives you that flexibility to really build complex B2B scenarios in your website, or to deal with more unique user experiences above and beyond maybe what you can easily get with an app in Shopify. We've got lots of interesting clients that do things like let you design your own products and all sorts of unique use cases. And we have clients in all sorts of categories that would be worried in a SaaS platform about butting up against different terms of service and such. So you own the data with Magento. It's your stack. You don't need as many third-party apps and things because it's a more robust platform in the first place, and you can use a lot of these one-time purchase extensions, or you can write them yourselves. And so it's really a bit of a different look at how to deal with e-commerce. It's more like, it's more akin to building your own physical brick and mortar store from the ground up versus sort of renting a kiosk in the mall or having, some other entity that's really controlling whether or not you stay there and when you can open and close and what the what the different terms of that look like.
So let's talk a little bit about search engine ranking and how the impact of site speed, security, scalability, and all impacts SEO, and how Magento compares in this regard to, say, other e-commerce platforms that we just mentioned.
So I think one of the core benefits of Magento, it's also in some ways a challenge, but that you control the entire stack. You're less reliant on third-party apps. And so you have more control of your speed when you're using a SaaS platform that doesn't have as many features out of the box, that you can't go and install extensions and optimize code to quite the same level. Part of the challenge that you run into is that you have less control of your speed, that you find that all of a sudden you're using 20 or 30 apps and it's really bogging you down. With Magento, you can get extremely fast hosting from a team like JetRails. You can go ahead and use a great theme like there's a new theme called Huva, comes out of Europe, HYVA, that's really fast. And you can pair a lot of these things together pretty reasonably and have a lightning fast site. And so that's really benefit in terms of the SEO factors involved. Google and other search engines, there's no secret that shoppers and other users don't want to be on slow websites. The bounce rates are much higher on slow websites. The conversion rates suffer. So they measure speed, and you'll see it in places like Google Analytics and, of course, in your Google Search Console webmaster tools. And they've now released some newer speed, I wouldn't call them rankings specifically, or tests, metrics called Core Web Vitals, where they look at not just raw speed, but things like cumulative layout shift. So as the page is loading, are things still moving and people are trying to click and it's moving as as they're trying to click? It's a nuisance, right? Everybody knows that that's not the experience that you want as a user. Google is trying to help make sure that the website owners and e-commerce merchants know what pages these things are happening on and have the opportunity to fix it. By addressing those speed issues, you're absolutely giving yourself a leg up in your SEO rankings. By itself, will speeding up your site another 10% make or break your SEO rankings? Probably not. I'm pretty level-headed about it. Will it give you an opportunity to get that edge on your competitor? Yes. Will it also improve your not just your SEO rankings, but your conversion rates? Yeah. Is it going to help with other advertising like your Google ads? Yeah. They actually take speed into account in quality score, in your page score. And so that's going to affect when your ads are showing and what the cost per click is, that it's all part of that algorithm. So you might actually, by speeding up your site, especially if it's a significant increase, you may see some of your metrics from your paid ads really improve nicely. So it's hard to say exactly how much it's going to move the needle for an individual. It also has to do with, in some cases, their competitors, both in paid ads and in who you're bidding against, in SEO, who you're trying to rank against, and if that's really going to give you that leg up on the competition, or if by not dealing with speed you're just falling behind. So absolutely an important factor. Not necessarily the one only factor that I'd be focused on, but it should be on everyone's minds, because if you're in e-commerce today in a time when Amazon has 50% of the market and you're not trying to deliver outstanding, wonderful user experiences, if you're not trying to delight your shoppers, I think that you're losing sight of the bigger picture, that it does take effort in order to continually win that customer, in order to delight that shopper and build some brand affinity with them.
On the topic of speed, is there any benchmarks that can be highlighted, or are there any tools that can help a user that's listening in?
So there absolutely are. One of the major factors that we look at, just as a quick baseline, is time to first byte. We have a speed test right on our homepage for speed that'll give that time to first byte time, TTFB. And so that's an important one, because that tells you if it's taking 3 seconds to get the first byte of data from your website, wherever it's hosted, to the shopper's web browser, something is wrong. It should be milliseconds. It should be really fast. So that's an important factor. In terms of looking at things like how Google is looking at site speed and looking at these core web vitals rankings, there are ways of doing that right from your Google Chrome browser. You can inspect a page, and there's a tool called Lighthouse that you can run on the site. Or at least on a specific page. It's really page by page. There are other websites like GT Metrics that do a good job of giving you a lot of data analysis on your speed if there are individual files that are failing to load in the loading of the site, if there are individual files that are causing delay, that are really slowing things down, things that need to be compressed or optimized, other things along the chain that should be operating better. Maybe you have a content delivery network, you have a CDN, but it's not really properly optimized, and you'll see that in some of the results. So there are a lot of these things that happen. Often, we find simple things like not having well optimized images. Some platforms, some websites are set up to automatically deal with that. Others, not so much. But by addressing some of those things, that you can really build some improvement. And above and beyond, coding and saving files properly, compressing them properly, it also comes down to some principles of, there are some sites that really just thought that they would load up every bit of content that they possibly could, and then some. They throw the kitchen sink at it, and they didn't really think about speed as a factor. And sometimes, as we've all heard now, I kind of have this litmus test of, in our homes, we're supposed to say, does this item bring me joy? Does it bring me pleasure? Like, do I need this, or should I chuck it? With websites, I think that we're also seeing people spend a little bit more time saying, do I need this? Do I need this app? Is this, I was using this app 2 years ago. It's costing me, $20 a month. Do I really still need it? Is it just slowing down my site? Is it just adding another attack vector into the site? If that company gets hacked, is it just giving another company access to my data and giving me more data privacy issues than I really need? Why do I have this? And so less is more, whether it's the apps, whether it's, just the wealth of content being displayed on a single page, that I think that a lot of it is going to circle back to that, figuring that out. But absolutely, there's some great tests out there that'll really give people a lot of that initial insight. Google's got a bunch of them. If you just Google search for Google speed test, you're going to find things like they've got page speed insights, and there's Lighthouse tool and a whole bunch of tools out there. They've got more and more every year, it seems like. I want to say they probably have 6 right now. And it will give you an idea, and as well in terms of benchmarking, if you're making Google happy, which is going to impact rankings and other things.
Awesome. So practicing a bit of minimalism with all the extensions and apps and blingy bits of our sites. Cool. So you mentioned earlier, it takes a village to run an e-commerce store. So obviously JetRails does not do everything connected to running an e-commerce store. So I want to go back to discussing your partnerships program and sort of how it is you work with all these different partners and third-party add-ons and all of that. Like, do your account managers sort of do like a mini audit and say, hey, it looks like you really could use some help in this area, and just sort of do an introduction? Or what's your process when it comes to partnerships?
So we do try to bring balance to it, which is always difficult when there's so many moving parts and so many different needs and opportunities in the e-commerce ecosystem in general. As we come across technology that fits in our stack, we continue to adopt new solutions and bring in new security scans and other things from third parties and such that enhance the experience. We believe that we do some really amazing things, and we've built out some great proprietary things, but we don't think that our place in the market is to be able to do everything that AWS or Cloudflare, some of these other companies, are able to achieve. And so we make those things available to our users, especially depending on their use case. We may recommend one solution versus another. There's a lot of flexibility in our stack, but we maintain that. In terms of agencies, we work with, from folks that, have, one or two people consulting or, working in more of a freelance capacity up through, through large, agencies with hundreds and in some cases thousands of employees. And then on the tech side, we're there standing side by side in the e-commerce tech stack with a lot of companies that in some cases their customers need what we have. And so, we want to be able to have that relationship and have good communication and make sure that we're solving their headaches. Their support team's getting tickets that have nothing to do with what they bring to the table. They need a good web host to be able to recommend for whatever the security or speed or whatever the other issue is, whatever bandwidth issues or things or firewalling that, that they're having problems interacting with the client's website. Lots of reasons why that might happen. But for us, because we have dedicated account managers, we know our clients well. We're not there to create their roadmap for their business. However, we're at the trade shows. We're in touch with all of these partners and other folks in the space. So when someone comes to us and says, hey, I'm having this challenge, or this is breaking down on me, for example, if we see that all of a sudden, a handful of customers are opening tickets, they're having a checkout problem, we see it all is deriving from a payment processor, you better bet that we're going to be in touch with that payment processor and let them know that we're seeing an aggregate problem and what that looks like, that we have those back channels with a lot of companies, certainly not all. The same is going to apply, if the customer is having a challenge and needs to replace something or needs to evolve past something, that we know a lot of those companies and we can make those recommendations. On occasion, we'll get out ahead of something and say, hey, look, we noticed you don't have something that addresses this. And, we think you might want to consider that because we think it's in everyone's best interest. If our clients are successful in growing, we're successful in growing. What we don't want to do is come to our clients every other day with some other new doodad and be pushing them in some kind of like an affiliate system. In most cases, we're not taking commissions from partners. We don't have, that's not the nature of our relationship. So, when we send one of our clients to one of our agency partners for work, we won't take any kickbacks. There's no quid pro quo there. For us, if that client doesn't get good service and doesn't and the site isn't being well maintained and operating effectively and efficiently, nothing is right in the universe. That's probably taxing our support team a lot more. Causing more grief for everyone in the food chain there. And so we're really looking at it much more in a long game solution. What's going to make our customers the most successful and the happiest? And so we do try to focus there. And there are things that occasionally do come up, like, clients will reach out to us because they're dealing with some credit card fraud issues. Scammers trying to use stolen credit cards in the checkout, in some cases even just carding attacks, or trying to see which, they buy, dark web lists of credit cards and things, and they're hitting the site trying to see which ones are still active, which are still and haven't been canceled yet. And, so for us, we want to be able to have partners that we can turn to say to our clients, okay, we can do certain things in the security stack that we operate, but there are other things that you can do within your website that are going to help to filter those sorts of things and block those users on the site level. We'll deal with a lot of the bot attacks, but there are other things that can still get through. So there's a lot of that balance in the overall outlook of how we look at relationships. And I host the JetRails podcast, and one of the things that we know, people hire us so that they don't need to know quite as much about web hosting. And so a lot of our content isn't focused on very technical intricacies. I mean, we have our knowledge base, learn.jetrails.com, and we have other resources, but a lot of our content is focused on how to grow and succeed in the space, how to continue to keep growing at the pace that you've been growing. And so that goes back to that village mentality of, we know that a lot of our partners are seeing amazing things, have great data that they bring to the table. We actually have an episode that's going to be airing soon with the Optily team. So, we are always looking for those insights to bring back home to our staff, to our customers, and our wider audience. And I think that that's important in the space today, to recognize that we can't be siloed, that we all have to really be paying attention to the bigger picture.
Awesome. That sounds great. And there's tons of great information there for our listeners. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So I'd like to wrap up with our final question that I'd like to ask all of our guests. And that is, if our listeners come away from this episode with just one thing that they could implement today that will help them accelerate their online business, what is your one main tip?
That is the toughest question of the day. For me, it's always looking at the long game. So it is really about having that strategic plan for the next few years, understanding where you want to be, and reverse engineering what that's going to take, and understanding sort of that risk analysis of what could get in the way of that success. And so is that scalability? Can your website potentially handle the traffic that you hope to get this Black Friday? Or do you need to load test, and do you need a team that's going to help with the auto scaling like JetRails? Have you been properly addressing security and PCI compliance? Do you know if you're checking all those boxes, or do you just assume that because you have some third party that's taking on some of the responsibility that you have none, which is not how that generally works. And even in SaaS, that if you add in bad code and things that lets the hackers in, that you have some responsibility there. There's lots of moving parts here that really should be looked at. And so many of us, we get caught up in our day-to-day, and we don't take the time to sit down and think about, okay, am I happy with the vendors that I have? Am I miserable with them? But, kind of like having a cell phone that cutting out now and then, that you're having support issues, you're having technical issues, that you put up with it longer than you should, or the cable company that you think you can't replace. Well, in the e-commerce space, there are options. There are lots of great options. And so from my vantage point, it's really just about taking the time, whether that's quarterly, biannually, whatever it may be, to sit down and review, and are we on pace? What's changed in this strategic plan? And what are the risks that we currently have in terms of being able to ultimately achieve that? And there'll always be changes. I mean, the last couple of years have certainly proven that out to, I think, most, if not all, folks that I've come across. But I think that for me, that the secret sauce is that there is no secret sauce. Is that, yes, you can be in the right place at the right time, and that you can benefit from a lot of that. But, imagine we saw sites that were in the right place at the right time and weren't ready for the influx of traffic that they had in the last couple of years, or weren't ready for increases in fraud or hacking or other things that we've come across. And so, proper planning goes a long way. I think that the old adage, an ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right. Awesome. That's a great tip. Well, thank you both for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you both. Thanks, Robert, Chris.
Thank you.
Some great insights there on the powerful e-commerce platform that is Magento. If you want to connect with Robert and the team at JetRails, contact them at jetrails.com. You can also follow Robert on Twitter with the handle @TheRobertRand. And make sure to listen to his podcast, the JetRail Podcast, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And that is our last episode for this year. It has been an absolutely amazing year full of learning experiences from all of our expert guests, both from Optily and from a variety of agencies and businesses across the marketing and e-commerce sector. And we'll be back in the new year with more thought leaders in the space who will keep us up to date with best practices and tips for success. If you want to keep up with Optily news, digital marketing strategies, and industry updates in the meantime, do make sure to follow us on social media with the handle @OptilyGlobal. And also check out our YouTube channel, which is constantly being updated with amazing content. So I wish you all the absolute best of luck in the holiday season, and we will see you back here in 2022. Take care.